So, in this video, I'll be talking about the 11 Fatui Harbingers. I started making this video basically as soon as I finished the last one, and seeing the overwhelmingly positive reception I got for that video, I decided to make this one in the same format and everything. It will go into a lot more detail than the previous video, but I'll try to explain even the basics, so that more people can understand it. This video is made mainly for the people who want to know more about the background of the Fatui Harbingers, but it will contain a lot of spoilers, since this time I have to dabble into the actual main story at least a bit when it's needed. But without any further delay, let's get into the lore. First, I want to talk about Fatui as an organization in general for a bit, and then I'll go over each of the Harbingers. So, as you probably already know, the Fatui is a military force from Snezhnaya that has a strong presence throughout all of Teyvat. It's said to be the strongest military of all the 7 nations, but the organization also contains a lot of diplomats or even politicians and merchants. In most nations where they are present, they don't have a very good reputation, and others are often wary of them, for good reasons. They serve the Tsaritsa of Snezhnaya, but the director of the Fatui, Pierro, also has a strong standing within the organization, and it's up to debate to what degree is he actually the one in charge. Anyway, despite serving the Tsaritsa, most of the Fatui seem to be unaware of her true goals, which haven't been revealed to the traveler just yet. They often use underhanded methods to gain some standing in other nations and eventually influence them in a way that benefits them. An example of this would be how in Inazuma, they influence the forces of the nation to incite conflict. Later, the Fatui use this conflict as an incentive to sell them weapons and profit from it, but also to take in the war orphans these conflicts created, to eventually raise these orphans into new Fatui soldiers, while weakening the whole nation in the process. One other thing I should establish before talking about the Harbingers is the concept of delusions. They are very similar to visions in that they both allow their user to use elemental powers, but unlike visions, delusions drain the user's vitality or have some other drawbacks. Meaning that while they technically can be used by anyone, most people who know how they work tend to stay away from them. But people who already possess a vision or have some other special circumstances can be more resistant to these side effects. These effects also seem to be connected to the fact that the delusions utilize the remains of powerful beings such as gods like Orobashi, whose corpse lies on Yashiori Island in Inazuma. So when I talked about the Fatui selling weapons there, this is the type of weapons I meant. The Fatui have been mass producing them and selling them across the 7 nations. The Fatui Harbingers are the most powerful of the Fatui, and the Tsaritsa has given them godlike executive authority. Unlike most members, they seem to be aware of the Tsaritsa's true goals, and their mission is mostly connected to collecting the Archon Snow Seas. Some of them use delusions to fight, but some of them don't seem to be fighters at all, and instead are powerful in some other ways. It's said that the ones ranked up to number 3 possess power equal to gods. The Fatui are divided into many divisions, which are all led by the Harbingers. So, for example, the Fatui serving a renowned and honorable fighter like the Captain may be very different from the ones serving a politician like the Rooster, but more about them later. I think it's worth mentioning that all of the Harbingers are, at least in their concept, inspired by Commedia dell'arte, which is a type of Italian theatre. It's characterized by masked characters, which is also referenced in some of the Harbingers' designs and tropes. I won't mention these outside references much here, so just note that such inspirations do exist. Also, interestingly enough, the Fatui translates to fools in Latin, so the Fatui can basically be described as masked fools, which is also partial reference in the lore. Now I'll finally talk about each of the Harbingers and their respective backgrounds in more detail. So, the lowest ranked Harbinger is Tartaglia. You may also know him as Child, which is a codename that he likes to use most of the time. However, his real name is Ajax, because his parents named him after a certain hero from the past called Ajax. The number 11 may invoke that he is the weakest among the Harbingers, but as I said earlier, in terms of strength in battle, that may not necessarily be the case. It just seems like for now, he is the least important and influential of the bunch. In Commedia dell'arte, his role usually depicts the lower working class, but it doesn't seem to be referenced in the game. Tartaglia was once a normal child from Snezhnaya, but when he was 14 he fell into the abyss. There he encountered a mysterious swordswoman named Skrk that taught him how to fight. Even though he spent 3 months in the abyss training with his new master, only 3 days passed in the outside world, as time flows differently in the abyss. He learned new combat techniques from Skrk, including his foul legacy transformation, which strengthens him for some time, but does so in exchange for great fatigue later. There, Skrk revealed to him that he accidentally awakened something, which was later revealed to be the all-devouring narwhal, which threatened to destroy all of Fontaine. Although at that time, she didn't tell him what exactly he awakened. His fate seems to be deeply connected to the all-devouring narwhal, as it is reflected even in his constellation. After he returned to the surface, he caught the attention of another Harbinger, Pulcinella. He was then recruited into the Fatui and quickly rose through their ranks. Eventually, he became a Fatui Harbinger, the youngest of them all. Unlike many others, he was chosen solely for his strength in battle. At some point in the past, he received a Hydra vision, and when he became a Harbinger, he was also granted an electro-delusion by the Tsaritsa. Pierro, the director of the Fatui, personally pinned the delusion onto him. Tartaglia appears friendly on the surface, but he is a warrior who pledges loyalty to the Tsaritsa as any other Harbinger. So even though his motivations may not be evil, he is willing to do some evil things, like unleashing a disaster upon Liyue in order to achieve his goals. He cherishes his family a lot. In fact, it was probably one of his primary motivations for joining the Fatui. He sends them money and gifts home all the time. They supposedly live in a small town in Snezhnaya, and we know that he has many siblings that he often talks about. In the main story, he quickly befriended the Traveler, and even though he is part of the Fatui, he tries to help the Traveler when he can. Right now, it's unknown who is the 10th Fatui Harbinger, or if there even is one. Some theories include the possibility of some sort of betrayal, Sandrone's robot counting as one of the Harbingers, Irwin's manipulation, or even Dilk's father Krepus possibly being one of them in the past. But that's all I say for now. Number 9 of the Fatui Harbingers is Pantalone, also called Regrator. He is someone who is best known for taking care of the Fatui finances. In Commedia dell'arte, he has exceptional greed, high status and mainly revolves around money, which seems to fit pretty well in Genshin as well. He was born into poverty and despite his strong ambitions, he never received a vision. This fueled his resentment towards the gods. The absence of vision led him to seek power and control in other ways, which eventually made him want to control the flow of money. Namely, he wanted to gain control over Mora, which is Teyvat's widely used currency. In the past, he tried to create a new currency that would challenge Morax's control over money, as he literally had the ability to create Mora. He used the Fortress of Meropide in Fontaine for these experiments, and it's thanks to him that they now use the credit coupons instead of Mora. Nowadays, he's the one in charge of Snezhnaya's finances, and he supplies the Harbingers with funds when they need them. He is also the one in charge of Northland Bank's operations, which is the most prominent bank across the 7 nations. He and his subordinates across the 7 nations seek ways to create profits and destabilize the other nations. He also works closely with the Doctor, but that's about all we know of him right now. Number 8 of the Harbingers is La Signora, also called the Fair Lady. Her real name is Rosalind Kruška Lowfolter, and she can be considered a legendary figure of history. In Commedia dell'arte, she is beautiful and calculating, and I would say that this is overall pretty well referenced in the game. Originally, Rosalind was living in Mondstadt before the cataclysm in Khaenri'ah. She loved to sing and was happily in love with a knight called Rostam. At some point in time, she was accepted into the Sumeru Academia and went there for her studies. She was likely studying something related to pyromagic. But while she was still in Sumeru, suddenly, the cataclysm in Khaenri'ah started, and when she returned to Mondstadt, she found out that Rostam died in battle against the monsters. Filled with rage, she used her life's flame to cleanse the world's crookedness, which eventually led her to abandoning her mortal body and instead becoming the Crimson Witch. She let a liquid fire flow through her, which hurt her own body in the process, and even though she only burned monsters, people started to fear her. The flames were slowly consuming her and destroying her own body. But before that could happen, Pierro found her. He decided to recruit her, and thanks to that, she received a cryo delusion, which helped her suppress the flames. Ever since this moment, she was known as a Fatui Harbinger called La Signora. As you may have noticed, Signora never possessed a vision, because her pyro powers come from her abilities as the Crimson Witch. Her personality changed much since becoming the Crimson Witch, and it seems like she didn't retain any clear memories from the past. Next is Sandrone, number 7 of the Fatui Harbingers, also known as Marionette. She is known especially for her ability to create various machines. In Commedia dell'arte, she is crude, clever and cunning, plus she is also straight up represented by a puppet, which fits her themes and appearance in Genshin perfectly. According to other Harbingers, she is always engrossed in her research regarding machines, which can be pretty clearly seen in her design and the big modified ruin machine that she is supposedly riding. I say supposedly because there are many theories that speculate that she may in fact be the ruin machine and that the girl is the real puppet instead. She is rarely seen, even by the other Harbingers, and is very secretive overall. She is able to create humanoid machines that are very technologically advanced and can very closely resemble humans. It's heavily implied that she may be the one behind creating Catherine from the Adventurers Guild. So far, her real identity hasn't been revealed, but it's speculated that she may be a Fontanian woman called Marianne Guillotine, which is an important character from Fontaine's history, and the sister of a famous mechanic and inventor, Ellen Guillotine. It would make sense that Sandrone is in fact a robot version of his sister, which he loved very much, and the robot that Sandrone is riding on could also somehow be connected to Ellen Guillotine, because of his interest and talent in constructing machines. I won't go too deep into this theory, as it's just that, a theory, but let me just say that there are many similarities between Marianne and Sandrone, especially in their appearance, clothing style and overall looks. She is now situated in Notcry, and it seems like we will be meeting her in the story pretty soon. Number 6 of the Harbingers is Scaramouche, also called the Balladeer, but you may know him as a playable character called the Wanderer. His story is very closely tied to the main story of Genshin, so I need to talk about it here. In Commedia dell'arte, he possesses many villainous traits and is often connected to puppetry, which again seems to be referenced in Genshin quite a bit. In the past, when Raiden A decided to create a puppet body for herself, so she can pursue eternity while the puppet would rule over Inazuma, she also made a prototype puppet. Since this puppet was meant only as a prototype from the very start, its intellect and appearance were not based on A herself. After she noticed that this puppet cried in its sleep, she thought that it would be too cruel to destroy it, so she chose to free it instead. She sealed its divine power and placed it in a mansion called Shakei Pavilion on Yashiori Island. Later, Scaramouche looked at this as his first betrayal because he felt abandoned by her. Eventually, this puppet was discovered by a man called Katsuragi. He decided to hide the puppet's origins, and eventually, the puppet was named Kabukimono, which means something like a wandering eccentric. In time, he became close friends with Katsuragi, but around the same time, another harbinger called the Doctor infiltrated Inazuma to start interfering in its affairs. He disguised himself as a Fontanian mechanic that helped them operate a device called the Mikage Furnace, which was using remains of the serpent god Orobashi. There, Kabukimono also got to know a smith called Niva. At that time, people weren't aware that those remains contained dangerous energy, but over time, it began to take toll on the people working there, and the furnace was filled with filth. While Kabukimono went for help to the Raiden Shogun, Niwa was secretly murdered by the Doctor, who also then took Niwa's heart and put it into a box. When Kabukimono returned, he was told that Niwa fled and left the people here to die. The Doctor also gave him the box, and while feeling betrayed, Kabukimono then proceeded to the furnace and purged all the filth there. He nearly died, but somehow managed to do it in the end. The Doctor then told him that Niwa killed one of his subordinates and put his heart into the box. After hearing this, Kabukimono was overcome with anger and threw the box away. He took this as his second betrayal and even much later returned to take revenge on the bladesmiths of Inazuma. Sometime after the incident with Niwa, he befriended a young sickly boy and they made a promise to live together as a family. However, the boy eventually succumbed to his illness and thus broke his promise. Kabukimono took this as his third betrayal. Then he was found by Pierro, because the Doctor told him about this potential new member. Pierro then persuaded him to join the Fatui, and Kabukimono accepted. The Fatui unsealed his powers, and this way he became known as Scaramouche, the sixth of the Fatui Harbingers. He worked mainly with the Doctor, who heavily experimented on him, and also made many trips to the Abyss. After the events of the Sumeru Archon quest, he learned the truth behind his betrayals and attempted to remove himself from Irminsul. But what happened instead was that he removed his memories and everyone's knowledge of Scaramouche. He couldn't fully remove himself and continued to live as the Wanderer. Later, after he faced his past once more, the Wanderer recovered his lost memories and received an Anemovision while doing so. Now he became the helper of the Dendro Archon and intends to face his past. In the eyes of the Fatui, the sixth seat of the Harbingers has been vacant for years, and the Harbinger known as Scaramouche never existed. He has a big grudge against the Doctor, who is now in Notcry. So the Wanderer arrived here as well, most likely to confront him once more. Number 5 of the Harbingers is called Pulcinella, or the Rooster. He is a very influential politician and currently a mayor in Snezhnaya. In Commedia dell'arte, he is a character who often takes out his frustration on others and is depicted with a comically exaggerated nose, which seems to be referenced in the game as well. He seems to be very influential in Snezhnaya, and he was the one who recruited Tartaglia into the ranks of the Fatui. He also takes care of Tartaglia's family, but it's suggested that it's just a way of Pulcinella controlling him through them. He doesn't seem to have any combat powers. Pulcinella is said to be an exceptional mayor and supposedly has the ability to persuade people easily, but not much else is known about him. Number 4 of the Harbingers is Arlecchino, also known as the Knave. She is the one in charge of the House of the Hearth, which is an orphanage run by the Fatui. In Commedia dell'arte, Arlecchino is a servant often acting to ruin the plans of his master, which also seems to be a theme in Genshin. Arlecchino's real name is Pierro, and her origins are unknown, but she is a descendant of the Crimson Moon dynasty of Canria. She grew up in Fontaine as a part of the House of the Harve. At the time, the orphanage was ruled by a former harbinger called Columbina. She wanted the children to call her mother, and seemed nice on the surface, but was in truth very cruel. In the orphanage, Pierro befriended Columbina's daughter called Clairvy, who was also a member of the orphanage. Columbina made the kids of the orphanage to fight each other to death, in order to choose the strongest among them. Eventually, Pierro was forced to fight Clairvy and killed her, but later also managed to kill Columbina, and eventually even replaced her as the new harbinger. The Tsaritsa pardoned her crime of killing a harbinger, and she ended up earning the title of the Knave. She has constant dreams of the Crimson Moon, and draws power from this ancestry. It's said that the ancient moon bloodfire burns within her, which is both a curse and a blessing. At some point, she suddenly received a pyro vision, which she later used in her fight against Columbina. After becoming a harbinger, she also received a pyro delusion, which enhances her pyro powers even further. Although she is serving the Tsaritsa right now, she is the type of person that is ready to betray her once she starts to threaten her organization and her own interests. While Arlecchino can be described as cruel, she is much more lenient than Columbina, and since she wanted to separate herself from Columbina, she is referred to as father instead of mother by the children of the orphanage. Columbina, or the Damselet, is the third of the Fatui Harbingers. Recently, she was revealed to also be known as the Moon Maiden. In Commedia dell'arte, she is a servant, often representing the only functional character, and tries to get the other characters together, which so far doesn't seem to be referenced in Genshin. She is worshipped by the Frostmoon Scions, as they have statues of her built throughout Not Cry. These statues are very similar to the statues of the Seven that can be found throughout the rest of Teyvat, but the ones in Not Cry depict Columbina instead of some Archon, and are called the Idols of the New Moon, which hints at the possibility of her rising as a new moon in Teyvat. Other harbingers imply that despite her appearance, she is a very dangerous individual. Anyway, she seems to be very closely tied to Not Cry, so we will probably learn a lot more about her soon. But for now, that's about all I can say about her. Number 2 of the Fatui Harbingers is Il Dottore, also known as the Doctor. He is well known for his obsession with research and his disregard for ethics. In Commedia dell'arte, he usually works closely with Pantalone, and he tries to interfere with the other characters, which seems to be at least partially the case in Genshin too. When he was young, he was known as Zandik. Even back then, he had an obsession with research, and wanted to create enhanced humans that could surpass the gods. Eventually, he was chased out of his hometown, and while he was a researcher in Sumeru Academia, he was once a part of an expedition to the desert of Sumeru. There he encountered a lot of Canrian records, which inspired him. While researching, he was accompanied by 2 companions named Dastur and Sohrei. After some time, Sohrei and Zandik started to understand each other pretty well, or so they thought. Later, while the exact circumstances remain unclear, Zandik is said to have done something he wasn't authorized to do, and Sohrei was supposedly heavily injured by some tigers, after which a killing machine appeared out of nowhere and attacked them. Zandik neutralized the machine, but was later punished for wanting to bring it back to the Academia for research. Eventually, Sohrei unfortunately died and was buried, but after her remains were examined again to verify the cause of her death, they found injuries that suggested that she was strangled to death instead, also suggesting that Zandik may have been the one to kill her for unknown reasons. Later, Zandik got involved in some other research, this time related to Eleazar, the illness that was caused by the forbidden knowledge. But at one point in time, thanks to the Aranara, all of his child subjects started to disappear. He then surmised that it was the Aranara's doing, and started to be interested in researching them. Anyway, Zandik actually managed to cure Eleazar in the end, but the treatment seemed to be so scary that his patients wanted to run away. Afterwards, the investigators at the Academia became suspicious of him, mainly because of Sohrei, and he was expelled. After this, he was found by Pierro, who promised him resources for his research. He agreed to join the Fatui and became known as the Doctor, which he himself found very ironic. Under him, the Fatui performed many more experiments related to Eleazar, which involved even Collei. He also infiltrated Inazuma on Pierro's orders, but I already talked about that in Scaramouche's section. After Scaramouche was recruited, Dottore was the one who unlocked his sealed powers. To surpass the limits of human cognition, as he himself called it, he created segments of himself at different ages and assigned different tasks to each of them. Right now, after the events of the Sumeru Archon quest, he seems to be located in Not Cry, working on some project related to the moon. The first and the strongest member of the Fatui Harbingers is Il Capitano, also known as the Captain or the Sentinel Knight in the past. He is known to be very powerful, but also very honorable, earning the respect of many Fatui members and even other Harbingers. In Commedia dell'arte, he often talks at length about made-up conquests and attempts to impress others by boasting, but others often don't believe him. This seems to be the exact opposite of how he is presented in the actual game. In the past, he was known as Freyne and lived in Khaenri'ah during the Eclipse dynasty. He served as a commander in the army. Back then, his heart was modified to be able to convert memories and souls into knowledge. During the Cataclysm, he was forced to watch as his nation and everyone he knew fell to the Abyss. After trying to fight the monsters of the Abyss, he and the remaining members of his platoon fled to Natlan, where he befriended the chief of the Masters of the Nightwind and continued to fight the Abyss. Thanks to his friendship with the chief, he found out about the secrets of the Pyronosis and its ability to potentially stop the Abyss from corrupting the ley lines. In his fight with the Abyss in Natlan 5 centuries ago, he forsook the ability of his heart to gain him knowledge and started to store these souls in his heart instead, because the ley lines weren't able to absorb them. Since then, he hoped that he would one day be able to find a way to release all of these lost souls into the ley lines and grant them peace. He was forced to hear all of their suffering voices, and thus was unable to sleep, which combined with the curse of immortality placed upon the Khaenri'ahs, worsened the state of his body drastically. He lost much of his former strength, and even his appearance was completely changed. At some point, he started to wear a mask to hide his changed appearance. Eventually, he was recruited into the ranks of the Fatui by Pierro, and became known as the Captain, while forsaking his past name for not being able to protect Khaenri'ah. After that, he ran into Varka's expedition for a bit, and supposedly peacefully departed to Natlan. The last person I want to talk about is Pierro, who is also the director of the Fatui. He is said to be the first ever Fatui Harbinger, and he seems to have a big grudge against Celestia. In Commedia dell'arte, he is depicted as a sad clown, which somehow seems to fit what we see in the actual game. In the past, Pierro used to serve under the Eclipse dynasty of Khaenri'ah as a royal mage. He even lived with our sibling for some time before the Cataclysm happened. He warned the king and the sages of Khaenri'ah about the dangers of harnessing abyssal power, but he was unable to stop them in the end. He was then cursed with immortality and even gazed upon Renova as she implanted the curse. Thanks to this, he is now obsessed with rebelling against Celestia, and together with the Tsaritsa, he established the Fatui. As I already said, he recruited many of the Harbingers, and now seems to be leading the Harbingers in their quest to get the Archon's Gnosis. And just as a bonus, since his quotes are so interesting to me, let me read some of them here. Since the stain of my compatriot's blood cannot be cleansed, I shall become the jester, who laughs in the face of fate. Since my level of learning could not compare with the sages, I failed to earn the favor of the previous ruler. So too did I fail to stop them from tearing away the veil of sin, ushering in a tide of divine wrath, destruction and foolishness. Then I shall become instead a fool, a fatus, and devote myself to Her Majesty, who understands my pain. As you can see, all of the Harbingers have very different personalities and goals, and the only thing that unites them is the hunt for the Gnosis. The Tsaritsa gives them a certain degree of freedom to pursue their own wishes, as could be seen in Natlan with Capitano. So far, they are presented in the story as villains, but in the future, when we learn more about their goals and motivations, we may even side with the Fatui in their fight against Celestia. But yeah, I think that's it. I don't really have anything more to add to this topic. I tried to make this video in a similar way to the previous one, since a lot of people seem to like that style, so I hope you like this one as well. I spent a lot of time making this video, so I hope it turned out well in the end. I will probably try to make at least one more video before Not Cry releases, since during its release I unfortunately won't have much time to work on videos. But with that said, take care and I see you in the next one.